This is my third iteration of the not particularly amusing joke that we're somewhere in between East and West Woodlands, and therefore I'm just going to call it Woodlands. Subtly amusing, but no more than that. This is the place where I was about 18 and I drank a tea that looks a bit like this. And when I say a bit like this, I mean this isn't the same tea, but it did look a bit like this. And encountered the worst taste maybe until I drank aluminium cleaner years later. And that's a whole story for a different day, kids. Story for a different day. So, and there's my bag, hopefully I don't lose it. This is where roughly speaking, and I'm waiting for that moment where I suddenly go, oh, that's the tree in it, but I'm not sure if it's going to happen. Where I was about 18 to 21, and I decided it would be a good idea, having a dear friend had explained to me a while ago, a couple miles down the road, I actually remember where we had the conversation, that there was this amazing medicine called ayahuasca, presumably spelt with an O or I don't know, who knows how to spell it, and that people would drink it and that their psychological issues would go bye-bye. And I said, yeah, but surely they must have to work, and it's really hard. And he was like, I said something about they must have to work to achieve that, and he said something, I don't know, I think they might just disappear. I'm not sure. And it's sad and wonderful when a friend with Asperger's who's been to too many free parties and taken too much acid has more valuable information than your doctor on how to resolve your mental health issues. But maybe if I followed the doctor's advice I could make a more realistic contrast there. But it was actually when I was him and another friend when I was about 16, and I'd heard of people taking LSD or acid or lysergic acid alpha-amide at parties, but this friend of mine, not the person who mentioned ayahuasca, but they were both sat there at a party near 5 miles from here, 10 miles from here, and he said something so interesting. He said that he took LSD by himself in his bedroom to help sort his head out. And I was like, what, for real? Because I was like 16, I'd only heard of people taking it at parties. And it's worth mentioning that both of these drugs seem to work through the 5-HT2A receptors, at least primarily. And serotonin, although there are people who question the monoamine hypothesis, not surprised, this subject has so many curveballs thrown at you every 5 seconds, it's a bit ridiculous. But if you're trying to understand how neurobiology relates to mood, you are going to get confused more than once. But yeah, serotonin seems to be wildly implicated in mood, and anyone who doubts the monoamine hypothesis completely should try ecstasy or MDMA, and that sort of spells it out pretty clear. But it was around here, I'm going back to find my bag because I want more tea, that I did it. The ayahuasca will always contain two things, most crucially. One is a source of dimethyltryptamine, and the other is monoamine oxidase inhibitors. Joe Rogan did a fairly good job at explaining why, but he did leave out some rather crucial nuances. Monoamine oxidase is an enzyme that exists in your gut and your brain, and if you take DMT into your stomach, DMT containing brew, pretty much doesn't matter how much there is in there. Maybe very, 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 very small amount will get into your brain, but I think 5-methoxy-DMT can get into your brain somewhat, but essentially you really don't, it's basically inert because your gut breaks down DMT. And so you need to inhibit that enzyme with monoamine oxidase inhibitors. Not MAO-A inhibitors, don't make that mistake, otherwise you're inhibiting your inhibitor and you won't get anywhere. But it's also about the monoamine oxidase inhibition in your brain. And monoamine oxidase exists in your brain in two isoforms, A and B. The A is selective for serotonin, I believe, and that's what the harmala alkaloids in B-carpy and panganum harmala inhibit. And it really matters as to the specific pharmacological makeup and everything. So is it panganum harmala? Is it B-carpy? If it's Banissaroxis carpy, is it the red strain? Is it the yellow strain? As to the nature of the experience. Devil is in the details, and God also resides in the details, and don't forget it. And it's certainly true when it comes to ayahuasca, for sure. So I found ayahuasca, and I found God as a result. That's fun. Actually, it wasn't fun. I basically ran away in what I would, roughly speaking, describe as a fit of terror. But I remember thinking, can you run away from a trip? I don't think you can run away from a trip. I think it follows you. But you can. You can run away. And it actually works. Well, it doesn't work completely, but it kind of works. You can get up and fucking start running, and sort of worked pretty well. If I'd known what I was doing, I would have had a sheet of Valium in my pocket just in case. And I wouldn't have used mimosa, I would have used chaperone. And I wouldn't have used panganum harmala, I would have used B-carpy. And I wouldn't have done it by myself, and about 18 other things, I suppose. I think mirtazapine can block the effects of tryptamines completely. Although I'm slightly dubious about saying that, because I'm not 100% sure if you can combine it with MAOIs. I think you can. But there's a big disclaimer here that if I'm wrong, you might get serotonin syndrome from doing the two. But certainly I think mushrooms or LSD, because mirtazapine blocks off the serotonin receptors and is serotonergic because of a compensatory response, I think. It jacks up serotonin levels. It's also a sedative, so that would be like a complete cessation to the trip. Something like a Tisalam would just mellow it out. So, for the sounds of angels, a single flower did grow. And as the flower grew, I came to know God. Came to know God? That's how you do English. As the flower grew, I came to know God. And it's not something that's ever left, although it took a subsequent ayahuasca trip for me to actually be able to surrender in a way that was meaningful. I think I started saying prayers after that trip, but again, it wasn't until later on that I was able to actually truly surrender in a way that was meaningful and have a really profound connection. I should say, by the way, that those angelic voices were the most beautiful thing I'd ever heard in my 27 years. Now, it happened nearly 10 years ago, but nothing has come close since. I fell in love, which was pretty, but I'd say she was maybe the most beautiful thing I've seen, but she's the most beautiful thing I've heard. Yeah. Can get sticky, read up some tobacco and cut up some nicotine patches. I always think it's sensible to go for the highest strength nicotine because it saves money, and then I end up all jittery, which is probably why I've slept loads very recently. You can wait there. I'm gonna have to listen to this video again because I think I quite poetically explained what happened with the flower and I never quite managed to put it so concisely. Well, I'm partly doing this because a friend asked me about ayahuasca. I said something about having a direct line to God. That was it. And she sent back a message saying direct, in block capitals and exclamation points and all the rest. I thought, fair enough. It is a pretty extreme statement to make, actually, saying that you've got a direct line to God. I should probably qualify that a bit. After my first trip, I said prayers, but it was mainly saying words at the ceiling. This is the trip I took here. After that, I did it again. Ayahuasca 3 nights in a row. The first night, after the first night, I felt terrible. But that's not surprising. Detoxification is a process that you need to, it's an art and a science. And the second day I did it, and I felt wonderful after that. So I'd mobilized the psychological toxins out of my subconscious, and now they were in my brain, and then like the conscious part, and I felt really gothically depressed or something, and then I did them another, did more, and then it all cleared, and the detox was complete. And then I went down to the woods, different woods, and did it again, and was compelled, against my comfort, I might add, heavily so, to surrender. And I didn't even know what I was surrendering to. And since then, prayer has taken on an entirely different character. I would say that music and prayer have both been rather deeply sustaining. My life is still an empty shell, but I can guarantee you that, I can promise you that an empty shell of a life where prayer is profound and meaningful and healing to the psyche is a lot better than a life where you don't know how to do that. Otherwise, the only place I would be able to go in moments of real intensity would be to abuse large quantities of narcotics. And sometimes it's a sort of toss-up between the two, actually. And sometimes I will do the narcotics and the prayer, thus combining my two favourite things. And by narcotic, I mean something that creates a state of narcosis, that is to say, a state of numbness. You could say that in terms of naturally occurring substances, opium epitomizes objects of narcosis, and iboga, root bark, epitomizes that which is on the opposite end of the spectrum, objects of catharsis. And it just so happens that one is a medicine for the addiction and the problems caused by the other, which is sort of suggestive of some kind of divine symmetry. It's pretty interesting. I might come back.